what was going on in PMQs yesterday. Lots of the front pages, the Mirror this morning, tone-deaf Tories, shame on you, of course, with regards to what Rishi Sunak, the jibe that Rishi Sunak made at Keir Starmer's expense. It's one of those moments, Jackie, where you sort of, you can understand what Rishi Sunak's trying to do. He's trying to get back at Keir Starmer. He's trying to underline the fact that he does all these U-turns. But the tone of that particular jibe on a day when Esther Jibe was going to be in the chamber as well did seem tone deaf, I think is as the Mirror said this morning.
I think it did, and it sort of outlines the problem with the culture war approach that is being engaged in, actually, by politicians on all sides, and that is that what seems to be a sort of clever debating point actually, of course, impacts on real people who have, in this case, of course, suffered the most awful tragedy, which is why I think there was such uproar as there would be in the chamber of the House of Commons about that. And then subsequent, of course, calls for Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, to apologise. He sort of had a slightly off week in terms of his sort of political approach. There are things that he's done that you sort of think, if you thought about that, you wouldn't have done it. That is an example. The bet, of course, that about Rwanda earlier on in the week. Sometimes he doesn't quite get things right in terms of political presentation. Never mind policy and all the rest of it.
I mean, I think that's part of what the problem is. I mean, it obviously was a horrific thing to do at that particular point, particularly for Esther, Mum, who's around there, because everybody would have been very sensitive to that. It was obviously not a good debate. Did he not know that she was going to be there? Or is that part of the problem, that when politicians on all sides are trying to score points, which I guess we're going to have to expect over the next years, we come up to an election and it's going to get more and more and more, they forget that the rest of the world doesn't think like that. You know, most people might not even remember the point he was trying to make about Keir Starmer when he tried to define a woman and said 99% or 99.9, whatever he did say, are born, you know, with women's genitalia, and the whole thing got convoluted at the time and offence was caused and there was a big debate. They won't remember that. They will just have an instinct. Why do that in front of the mother of someone who's been through that? And is that part of the problem, that politicians forget how it all resonates with us?
Well, Quentin watches politicians a lot. I don't know what you think. I mean, I think Prime Minister's questions is a particular sort of... it's very gladiatorial. It will be about that type of jibe, that type of sort of battle across the dispatch box. So it's quite often a bit unprepossessing for people to watch, actually.
Yeah, well, that's all one view, isn't it? But to me, in the House at the time, nobody understood. Nobody was following quite what was going on. Esther wasn't there in the gallery at that point. No. And this strikes me as sort of outrage Olympics. And really what Keir Starmer was upset about, it struck some of us, was Sunak teasing him about his indecision over all the transgender self-identification thing. I think undoubtedly Sunak stepped on a bit of a bit of a landmine, but it didn't really. That gasp you heard in the Commons on the tape there wasn't from the Labour side. That was from the Tory side. Mocking Starmer because he came over all butch and sort of arched his back like an upset cat. So it's slightly, these things are not quite as clear. Maybe,
so within the context of what was actually happening in the chamber.
In the context of what was, yeah.
Should the gasp have been there, though? Or...
No, because I don't think... And then there's a sort of confected... the message was sent out by Labour whips to Labour MPs, who are then going to ask questions to, hey, you know, you've got to mention this. So they then all affected, which seemed to me, affected terrible outrage about this thing. I just prefer it when... let the viewers, let the voters decide their outrage for themselves, rather than being told, you are upset about this.
Should he apologise, Jackie?
Yes, I think he probably should. I'm sure he did know, actually. I would be very surprised if his people hadn't told him that...
Well, it was announced. Starmer announced at the start, but she was there, the mother was there with her Labour MP.
Was it a lack of spontaneity? Because...
Pre-written...
Yeah, but these things are...
Speech and things to the...
But Kate, all these things are pre-scripted. They have
Yeah,
pages of script.
but you and I would look and think, oh, gosh, we might change our...
You'd self-edit. And Marvin was saying it. We have to do it live
you know?
when we're reading something and something that we have to self-edit when we're on
It's
air.
possibly a bit harder in a House of Commons
in that
when
arena,
everyone's screaming at you.
Yeah.
You're right.
But they, to be honest, a bit like television studio guests, perhaps, they all talk too much. And
I don't know who you're talking about.
they should. I mean, I think the best thing in the House of Commons, if I was ever going to be coaching somebody for the Commons, say Jackie or something like that, I'd say brevity.
Yes.
And the Scots Nat leader, Stephen Flynn, is much more effective than Starmer because he keeps it short.
But coaching for the Lords, that's what we need to think about, Jackie.
Are you going to the Lords? Yes. Lady Smith.
Lady Smith, it's only about time. But with regards to that, when we say stuff and we are in a live environment and we talk a lot, as you were saying, and your contributors tell you talk a lot, you can sometimes say things that come across that you didn't mean to, you didn't understand the full implication.
Yes.
And so, actually, apologising is an important part
That's
of
the reason to apologise.
Yeah, but there's a whole sort of politics. There's a sort of politics of apology, isn't there? And then, which all becomes very sort of sticky, and they don't like apologising because then it's hung around their necks. I don't know. I mean,
by people like you, Quentin, who you want people to apologise and then you hang it around their necks. I don't. No,
I'm a sort of live and let live.
But it's a legitimate thing to do at Prime Minister's questions, just to challenge U-turns that you think that the leader of the opposition has done. That's completely legitimate. But you shouldn't be cloth-eared about the way that you're doing it, given, Kate, as you say, people are watching and people are actually in the chamber.
But don't politicise these things.
Well,
on the whole.
I mean, I know in some ways it's a bit naff, but I don't think Keir Starmer started the politicisation, did he? He didn't start it.
He introduced.
No, he's not. Keir Starmer is not pursuing a culture war. Rishi Sunak is. And my point is, when you pursue a culture war for political reasons, there are people, there are human beings who get distressed and damaged from that.
Yeah.
Talking of Rishi Sunak's apparent week of potentially lapsed judgment, Daily Express indicated that he might have opened the door to an amazing Boris Johnson comeback.
I mean, that would be a U-turn.
He didn't... this came out of an interview.
Is that written by Boris?
It's part of an ITV1 interview.
He didn't close the door to a certain amount of friendship between them. He mentioned that he had spoken to him.
I think we've got the soundbite. Shall we hear him? Shall we hear what he has to say?
Let's hear what he said and see if it is indeed the hint of a comeback.
Obviously, your party felt Boris Johnson had to go, but he was a huge proven election winner. I mean, do you miss him sometimes? Would you have him back in your cabinet?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm proud of the work that we did together, and we worked well together for a long time. And obviously, look, in the end, there are well-documented differences that we had.
I noticed you didn't answer whether you'd have him back.
Well, I never talk about these personnel things, but look, I speak to him on an occasion. We worked well together. I mean, I spoke to him, I can't remember, right? Probably late last year. But but again, this is not about individuals.
8:30 tonight.
It's a bit of a non-story.
Up close.
It is about individuals.
Yeah. So, I mean, Jackie, he's sort of, there was no firm no. It wasn't a hard no, was it?
Yeah, but I mean, I feel a bit sympathetic to him about that. It's a bit like saying, would you have Quentin Letts in your cabinet? Oh, well, I'm not going to comment on that on the moment. Does not mean that Quentin is going to go in the cabinet. I mean, of course, the problem for Rishi is he has brought David Cameron back. So he's got...
There's precedent.
Exactly, there's precedent, which is why he will always be asked, are you going to bring so-and-so? Are you going to bring so-and-so? He probably needs a better answer than that, but I don't think that is Boris is heading back to the cabinet.
But in the question, though, he is a proven election winner. He's a big... there are lots of Tory supporters that absolutely adore him. That, if things are looking pretty bleak as they come to the election, is it such a bad idea to suggest that Boris might be coming back, Quentin? I
think not, actually. I mean, do you remember that in 2005 election or 2001, Tony Blair bought Gordon Brown an ice cream.
Yes.
And it was a great moment, actually. It was wonderful, wonderful sketch. But because Gordon and Tony hadn't been getting on very well, and the ice cream somehow melted the two of them. And that was great, because, they needed the two of them at that time. And I reckon the Tories could do with Boris. I mean, Boris, terrific campaigner, and he's quite popular in the country still, despite what people say.